from CodeSoc from the University of Warwick. And today we'll be showing our gap-minded data dashboard for the UCL challenge.
The chloropleth map allows a rapid visual comparison of countries for the selected metric. At a glance, the user can very easily identify countries and regions as standout. When viewing GDP per capita, global economic equality becomes immediately visible. In the United States, much of Europe and Oceania consistently show up as top performers, shaded in lighter tones on the map. In contrast, many African countries, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, appear at the lower end of the scale, representing weaker economic performance. Switching the metric to population, China and India are visual standouts, whereas countries like Iceland, shown in the darker tones here, have very low populations. For life expectancy, there are clear regional inequalities. Australia, Europe, and North America are clear winners, each averaging in the range of 75 to 80 years, while the lowest life expectancy is seen across countries in Central Africa, often below 50 years in the earlier years.
The line chart plots the selection metric group by continent and shows the trend over time. This view adds temporal dimension and allows us to observe broad patterns such as steady growth or sudden disruptions. For GDP per capita, the chart shows a steady increase over time for the Americas, Europe, and Oceania. Oceania has consistently had the highest GDP per capita of all of the continents across the given time frame. There is a clear divergence from Asia and Africa, which show the lowest GDP per capita. Switching the graph to life expectancy, over time we see a steady increase in life expectancy across all of the continents, with Asia and Africa again lagging behind the others. One thing that's interesting to note is the drop in life expectancy in around 1962, which could be linked to the Great Chinese Famine. The stats bar chart for population shows a general increase in the global population over time. Here we see that Asia dominates the global population, with Oceania having a minute proportion of the overall population.
The radar chart provides a multi-metric snapshot of the selected country in any given year. Each axis represents one metric, and the shape of the polygon provides an at-a-glance profile of the nation's strengths and weaknesses at a glance. This allows the user to single out a particular case study in line with the rest of the dashboard. For example, in 1952, Kuwait shows exceptionally high GDP per capita, whilst having a very small population and moderate life expectancy. This reflects the onset of significant commercial oil production and exports, which lead to high wealth concentration. India and China are interesting to watch evolve over the years. In the earlier years, both had narrow polygons skewed towards population, high populations but low GDP and life expectancy. Over time, their polygons expand outwards, and the GDP and life expectancy dimensions, illustrating their economic and public health progress whilst maintaining huge populations. This pattern aligns neatly with what was observed in the chloropleth and will also appear in the bubble chart.
The bubble chart compares GDP per capita and life expectancy directly, with the sign of each bubble representing its population, and each country color matched to its continent. It shows a clear positive correlation. Nations with higher GDP tend to have longer life expectancy. From this, one might conclude that wealthier countries can support better healthcare, infrastructure, and overall quality of life. You might notice that African countries, labeled here in turquoise, tend to cluster together at the lower GDP and life expectancy, whereas European and American countries tend to cluster at the opposite end of the scale, with higher GDP and life expectancy. This is in line with the conclusions we drew from the line chart, which shows Africa with a very stagnant GDP growth. What's also interesting is seeing how countries move across the map with time. For example, China and India appears to migrate up the trend line, with increasing GDP per capita and life expectancy, whilst other countries, such as Nigeria and others in Africa, stay at the same region of the chart. This highlights the progressive nature of India and China, which perhaps have benefited from their large working populations, which have driven economic growth through manufacturing, trade, and services.
The dashboard has integrated interactive controls with helpful comments on how to use each of the widgets in the sidebar. In terms of accessibility, the dashboard has been designed with everyone in mind. The color scale drop-down allows the user to select an appropriate color via the keyboard, including colorblind-friendly scales such as Cividis, Viridis, and Turbo. For transparency, a button to download the raw data CSV has been included. The diagrams are also large, and each of the figures can be viewed in full screen for the short-sighted. We use a simple, low-in-words interface to make it obvious what to do for the user.
Together, these visualizations form a coherent narrative. The global metrics provide context, the map shows geography, the line chart shows history, the radar chart gives detail, and the bubble chart shows relationships. Combined with interactivity, they transform raw numbers into a visual story of how humanity has changed over the decades. We see that the Western world, Europe, Oceania, and the Americas consistently dominated economically, whilst China and India have seen rapid economic growth, perhaps supported by their large populations. Still, some African countries and some Asian countries are consistently lagging behind in GDP and life expectancy, with growth across all metrics remaining relatively stagnant. Thank you for listening.